For today's bike check, we're having a look at Greg Callaghan's prototype Devinci. It's a high pivot bike, it's made from carbon fibre and it looks cool as anything. Okay, so we're going to jump in and look at the heart of the bike first. Greg's actually going to be joining us and telling us the finer details of his setup, but I'll pick things up first. So this one is clearly a prototype, and as you've already seen, or you might have seen on GMBN Tech, we've had a look at one of these already. And they bear this prototype decal on the down tube. This one doesn't really say much. It says seat angle 90 degrees, which we know it's not. I'm going to speculate and say that's about 77 degrees. Knowing how tall Greg is, I would assume that this is a size large. Hard to tell these days because when you measure a seat tube, you don't really get a true indication. So it's an 18.5-inch seat tube, which is 470 essentially. And if I draw a straight imaginary line up and measure what the reach would be, you could guess that this is about a 480 reach. So I'd say this is probably a size large, and that's about right for a modern bike. Head angle, again, hard to tell, but most modern enduro bikes with around 160mm travel are running around a 64-degree head angle. Some of them a bit slacker like the Norco, but give or take about 64 degrees there. Out back, your chainstays on this model are 440 currently on here, so pretty decent length on there, and it's running 29-inch wheels front and rear. Right, so to the exciting bit, the back end and the rear suspension. As you probably noticed, it's got a high pivot on there. We're seeing a lot of new bikes coming out with high pivots, in particular bikes with upwards of 160mm of travel, bikes that are really focused around a sort of riding scene here at Val di Fassa in Italy. Severe terrain, and you're going to have an appropriate suspension design to handle it. Now the cool thing about this is at a glance it looks a bit like a linkage bike because you can see it's got pivots around that rear wheel axle. That is the DW or the Dave Weigel split pivot. So the job of that is essentially to decouple or to adjust the anti-rise, which is the effect of suspension and brakes together, or the braking on that suspension. So the bike essentially is a single pivot with a linkage to drive the shock, and they're using the split pivot to manipulate what they want to happen when you actuate the rear brake. In an ideal world, you want it to be isolated from the suspension so you're not affecting it. But on some bikes, we've seen this on downhill bikes, you essentially can use the rear brake to help the suspension squat into the travel to give yourself more traction. We'll ask Greg about the feeling of this bike and how it works for him. But something particularly cool about this design is the idler wheel itself. This one is fully enclosed like a chain guide, and it's even got a derailleur cable routing that goes straight through it and into that sort of chainstay swing arm there, right down to the rear wheel here. Really cool stuff. Not going to be losing the chain with that. And the shock absorber on the rear end is a Fox Float X2. So this is an air shock on here, not a coil. So you could suggest that this might have a more of a linear rear end, and they're using the air shock there to tune the feel of the suspension. We're going to ask Greg about how his bike feels and how he likes his setup when he joins us. It's a really cool looking bike, and it's got this crazy sort of wrap finish on here. And on the top tube, here's one who's got a decal that says spotted, and it's slightly different on all the frames that we've seen. Up to the cockpit of the bike, Greg is running a carbon bar. Again, we've pretty much exclusively seen carbon bars on the bike checks we've been doing. He's running 780 bar, so not quite full length. The widest bar we've seen so far, actually, a lot of people are trimming down even narrower than that for clearance through the trees. Brakes very inboard, so obviously Greg likes to be braking right on the end of the brake lever. The bite point on his brakes is really close to the actual bars actually, so he likes a lot of lever travel, or perhaps he likes to ride with the brake just sitting under his knuckles, so that really strong position just to be able to squeeze when you need to use the brakes. XTR levers, XTR 4-piston calipers on there, 203mm rotors, and front and rear on here he's running the vented pads that have got the heat fins on them to help dissipate that heat. The rest of the controls got ODI lock-on grips, XTR shifter under the bar there, and his Fox remotes for the dropper post. Now, just a couple of things I've observed here is Greg's running his bars quite far backwards, also his seat. Wondering if that's just his preference or if it's something to do with the terrain here in Italy. And he's also running one of the OneUp components tools that is straight inside the head tube here, with a plug on there ready to stab in the tyre in the event of a puncture. And up front, Greg is running a Fox 38 fork with what appears to be 170mm travel on the front here. Lovely looking fork, obviously stiff as anything, and he's got this cool RRP direct mount mudguard. Super clean and tidy, no cable ties or anything needed. And as far as the wheels go, he's running Raceface on here. They're Turbine 2s. using that Volt hub on there. 35mm rims, nice and wide, with offset spokes on there. Really cool. Looks a little bit weird when you look down at them, just seeing them slightly offset, but essentially it can make for a stronger wheel. Maxxis Assegai on the front, it's got DHR2 on the rear, the same effective wheel on the back end there, and judging by the valves it looks like he's running Cushcore in there, but we'll ask him about his setup on that because it's different on everyone's bikes. Okay, and onto the transmission of the bike. A bit of a mixture going on here on Greg's bike. It's got H2 pedals on the front, 170mm carbon Next R cranks from Raceface, 32 tooth chainring. The lower guide is an LG1 and it's running a 12-speed setup with an XTR rear derailleur on there. And interestingly, he's got that 45 on there as well. So it's a 1045. Remember, there's two options in the Shimano 12-speed cassette. You get the 1051 or the 1045. So perhaps he's got a bit more horsepower than some of the other racers. All cool stuff to see. Finishing kit on the bike, it's got a bottle cage on there. Doesn't look like he's carrying any other spares on there other than a tool in the head tube there. It's got Fox transfer posts on there with a Kashima coating, and it's got a Devinci branded Bel Air saddle there. Very cool stuff. Let's catch up with Greg and find out how the bike is set up. Okay, so we've got Greg Callaghan here with this Devinci prototype. I've been kind of drooling over this for like the last half an hour, just checking out the stuff on it. Let's just talk about the high pivot thing, because everyone's talking about high pivots at the moment. Is there more friction, and does it work better over the bigger bumps?
Yeah, definitely. Like straight away, it's better on the bigger bumps. Like straight away when I rode it, you just notice how it just calms the trail down a lot. So the kind of chattery bumps that you kind of feel like are always taking your speed away, the bike just is so smooth over them, and it really calms things down. In terms of drag, I haven't noticed it. Yep. It was something that was kind of in the back of my mind when first riding it, but I haven't noticed it at all, to be honest. To
be fair, everyone I've spoken to with all the other ones have all said the same thing. I think they're all a bit like worried, but everyone's so in the mode of the bike, of how it runs on the terrain.
Yeah, exactly. And like, you know, there's a good bearing in the pulley, it's a good chain, everything's, once you keep everything lubed and in good condition, it all runs really smooth.
I love the fact that that upper pulley is like a chain guide as well.
Yeah,
no one else has got that. It's really clean.
Yeah, it's really clean.
It's good, no chance of losing the chain. So tell us a bit about how you like to have your suspension set up in terms of perhaps the amount of sag and how you like the ride to feel, like fast or slow, etc.
Yeah, so it's something like I've had the bike about a month now, and it's pretty much been getting the settings right since then. So yeah, I'm running about 25-26% sag in the rear and about 21% in the front. I've kind of always had a little more in the back just to kind of help me sit back into the bike a bit. And yeah, I'd say, like if I was to take the bike out now for a cruisy ride, it would feel pretty stiff. But then when you get up to race speed and you start hitting things a bit harder, it really comes into its own then. So like my setting in winter at home on slow muddy trails, and when I'm not really that focused on going fast, it would be a lot softer than it is right now. Yep. But yeah, it's definitely a race setup.
What about terms of damping with compression and rebound on there?
Yeah, I think like I'm nothing crazy really. I'm probably pretty average on it. Like people have said to me that they can, when they hop on my bike, that it feels pretty rideable to them. Whereas I guess with some other riders, you might hop on it and be like, well, how do you ride this thing?
Really slow or whatever.
Yeah. So I think I'm not too extreme really on my settings.
Okay, so let's move on to the wheels then. You're running alloy rims on here, I guess for the same reasons most people are. Yeah. So you can sacrifice them to get through a stage. Yeah,
exactly. Like I've had punctures in stages, and like we've got the Cushcore in there, and you know, I can get a puncture halfway through a stage and just keep riding because I know the wheels can take it, and the Cushcore will help as well with that. So yeah, for me, alloy's really my only option.
Have you ridden carbon previously, or for testing or anything, or just focus on these?
I've actually never ridden them, but as well, like I like a soft wheel. Yeah. So you know, carbon is stiffer, and I do like the soft feel of the alloy as well. So.
I'm guessing his frame's pretty stiff as well, looking at the size and the amount of material there is.
Yeah, it's good. I think you know the mixture, the kind of the frame stiffness and the softer wheels kind of go really well together to. You know, the frame is efficient, and then the wheels kind of get you that extra traction and suppleness.
Do you run the Cushcore in the front as well?
Yeah, I'm running front and rear. Yeah, I switch between running the XC one on the front, just to keep it a bit lighter.
What do you run in terms of pressure?
I'm 21 psi in the front and 23 in the rear, with downhill casing tyres. So yeah, I feel with the downhill casing, because the carcass is that bit stiffer, you can run the pressure's a bit lower.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so onto the cockpit of the bike. So you're running what, 780 on the bars?
770, probably 780.
Bit of grip, kind of. Yeah. Okay. Feels like you've rolled. Might be the angle of the bike on the grass. Feels like you've rolled them back a little bit.
Yeah, I used to always get slagged for having them pretty far forward, because I come from trials originally, and like trials riders run them crazy forward. So I've kind of been working them back, and I like where they are now. So it's kind of one of those things that can change. Some days you get on it, it doesn't feel right, and you kind of play with it a bit.
And what about with regards to alloy bars and carbon? Have you picked carbon for a reason? Is it for comfort? Or?
I've just kind of always ran them, to be honest. It has been something I've wanted to try this year, and I probably will between the races, the alloy bars, but I've had no problems with the carbon bars. There's no problems with my hands or arms. So.
And do you ever change the front wheel travel or your stem position up and down for different tracks?
Yeah, actually the Tweel and Whistler are probably the only races I've done that for, just because it's so steep and rough there. So like I'll maybe in the Tweel put 5 mil under the stem and bring it up a bit. And then the forks are at 170 at the moment, and I might try 180 in the Tweel.
Yeah, and have you got any other sort of settings you change between events other than those obvious ones? I guess you might change tyres for specific tracks? Or?
Yeah, but to be honest, not a lot changes, because I think between different stages you can need so many different setups. So like I kind of have a setup that I feel will work everywhere. So you know, maybe if it's muddy I might throw a shorty on the front, or front and rear if it's that muddy, but generally this is pretty much how I race it.
Okay, and now over to the sort of transmission. So it looks like you've got 170 cranks, 32 tooth chainring on there, and steady state, I guess that's probably the same for most races. Yeah,
it depends. If the liaisons are extra steep, I might switch to a 30 in practice.
Yep.
And just save the legs a bit, and then I find in the races we usually, if a liaison's steep, we'll just kind of walk it anyway. Okay,
and the rear cassette, you've gone for the smaller option out of the two 12 speeds.
Yeah, I had been running, last year I was running the bigger cassette, the 1051 with a 34 chainring. And this year I've gone smaller chainring, smaller cassette, just to kind of keep it neat. There's smaller gaps between the gears, and then with that smaller cassette you can run the smaller derailleur. Yep. So less chance of just
everything's a bit tighter in there. Feels like there's a lot of people talking about this at the moment.
Yeah, and understandably so. Like it's a good looking bike, and yeah, it rides as good as it looks.
Exciting stuff. Thanks for your time, and good luck in the next race.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, there we go. That is the Devinci that belongs to Greg Callaghan. I think you'll agree it's a really cool looking prototype. Certainly one of the cooler bikes here at EWS round number 1 in Val di Fassa. Let us know what you think in the comments underneath, and don't forget, give him a thumbs up if you like his bike, and see you in the next video. See you later.